I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I think I might be dying. This SUV shoots out of a parking lot. In my mind, I thought, I can't believe this is happening. I let off the clutch, tried to jump off my bike, and I was T-boned, thrown 30 feet. And I just remember sliding across the asphalt, looked down at my leg, and it was just completely broken into pieces, and there was already blood everywhere. A week later, I woke up out of a coma, and the first thing I learned was they said, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to amputate your leg. Everything that I've gone through, it qualifies me to help someone that is struggling, that hasn't been able to get through that situation. I encourage everyone listening to shine a light on your shame. There's a saying that when you share pain, it's divided, and when you share joy, it's multiplied.
Hello and welcome to the Show Your Value podcast, where we explore the art of value creation in three macro buckets: material value creation, emotional energy value creation, and spiritual value creation. Today, my very special guest is Amberly Lago. Amberly is a speaker, podcast host, best-selling author, and survivor. Amberly, welcome. So good to have you here.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, of course. And getting ready for our discussion, I read True Grit and Grace, and actually listened to the audiobook, and I was riveted. It was one listening all the way through. I couldn't stop. And you did such a great job of taking us from early childhood, I would call it for sure trauma, through this amazing dance and fitness career to an accident at 38 with 34 surgeries to save your leg, and how you launched from there into creating massive value in the world. Great job with the book. I have so many questions after reading it. There needs to be volumes 3, 4, and 5, after it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for reading my book. And that makes me feel good because I'm actually working on my second book. And when I wrote my first book, I had those thoughts of, oh my gosh, who's going to want to read this? I don't know if any other authors ever felt like that, but I was like, oh my God, a little self-doubt would creep in. And I thought maybe with my second book that would go away, but no, it's still there. Thank you for saying that.
Fantastic. Can't wait for the next book. And I love that you narrated it, right? The audiobook portion of it. Thank you for that, because you can feel the passion going through. And for our listeners, if you could, what was your life like leading up to the accident?
Oh gosh. Well, I had worked hard to, I grew up in Texas and moved to California to pursue my dreams when I was 18, had a great dance career. I mean, my first big break in the dance industry was I was in an MC Hammer video, and I was like, oh, I've made it, and was really living that California dream where I'd worked hard to build this fitness career and employed several other trainers. And I also helped other people get certified to be a trainer and run their businesses. And I was doing fitness videos. I was sponsored by Nike, infomercials. I was on regularly contributing to Shape and Health magazine. And I was on vitamin labels, and fitness was my life. And, finally met the man of my dreams, 2 beautiful children. And I remember, I was a big time runner. I ran every day. That was like my therapy. That was my joy, was to run. And I ran 11 miles in my best time ever, trained some clients, and I jump on my Harley, and I'm so ready to just take the long way home because it was such a beautiful California sunny day. And I'm just cruising along Ventura Boulevard, and this SUV shoots out of a parking lot. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's too late. In my mind, I thought, I can't believe this is happening. And I let off the clutch, tried to jump off my bike, and I was T-boned, thrown 30 feet. And I just remember sliding across the asphalt and thinking, I just hope another car doesn't hit me, because I couldn't tell what I was sliding into. I mean, Ventura Boulevard's a very busy street. And I finally came to a stop, and I looked down at my leg, and it was just completely broken into pieces, and there was already blood everywhere. And at the time, I didn't know my femoral artery was actually severed. And one of the first thoughts I had was, oh, this can't be good. I might have to train clients on crutches for a while. Like that was one of the thoughts I had. I was like, how am I going to what am I going to do next? How am I going to keep working? And, luckily I had a guy, he ran over, made a tourniquet around, took his belt off, made a tourniquet around my leg. But I realized just how serious it was. I mean, I was screaming, I was singing some cuss words and thinking, and another thought was, oh, my Methodist mother wouldn't be too proud of me, but I couldn't control the screams coming out. And I noticed people weren't running over to me. They were looking. There was one lady that fainted when she saw me. It was that bad. And, paramedics got there, thankfully, really quick. They were actually right down the street at a Coffee Bean and they heard the accident. So I feel like I got very lucky that there was like a guy who made a tourniquet on my leg. The paramedics were right down the street. I didn't realize you can bleed out in literally minutes when your femoral artery is severed, and rushed to the hospital, and it was chaotic. The room was filled with cops. My husband was a cop, and news travels fast in the police force. And so the room was filled with, all his friends and my friends too of the police force. And I'd never seen him cry. He's a big, strong, tough guy. He's a first responder. He was crying hysterically. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I think I might be dying. And I just yelled across the room. I was like, honey, I need you to get over here. I need you to be strong for me. Because in that moment, I thought, I don't know if I'm going to wake up. I don't know if this is it. And I need to know he's going to be able to take care of our two kids. And that's the last thing I remember before, they put me in induced coma because I was literally dying. My organs were shutting down from the blood loss. They couldn't control the pain. And a little over a week later, I woke up out of a coma. And the first thing I learned was they said, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to amputate your leg. It's like a war wound. You have a 1% chance of saving it. So we need to go ahead and amputate it. And I was like, well, wait, there's a 1% chance of saving it. Well, then there's still a chance. And I want to find a doctor who's willing to take that chance with me. And so by the grace of God, a lot of prayer and a lot of, my husband calling in favors, and we got me transferred to another hospital where Dr. Wiss did surgery after surgery. I had a team of surgeons, but they would come in and huddle up to make a plan of what they were going to do next. And took 34 surgeries in total, but they saved my leg.
Yeah, that's so terrible to go through that. I'm kind of curious when your identity, I think, in a lot of ways at the time was, in a big part as a dancer, fitness instructor. I mean, this nationally recognized. How did you work through that? What was that like the first year to kind of get through that? Because that went away immediately.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it really hit me in the hospital. I was like, I think being an athlete helped me with my mindset. I think that, my faith definitely played a part. I was talking to God every day. And I was just focusing on what can I do instead of what can't I do? What can I do to be the best that I can be to prepare for the surgery the next day? And I mean, when I say that, I was doing everything from, like, if my sugar levels got over 125, they would give me insulin shots. So I cut out all carbs, all fruit, all everything, so I wouldn't have to take insulin shots. Cause that, when your sugar levels are too high, it can cause infection. And I didn't want to risk infection and having an amputation. And so, it hit me though one night in the hospital. I didn't sleep because I was in so much pain. And I would also watch the clock because every 3 hours they would come and rip these bandages off my leg, was held together by these metal rods. And they would rip these bandages off and my leg was completely exposed. And I would sit there and look at the clock. And I remember there was one night I was watching this infomercial on TV and I was all by myself in the hospital. And, there was this infomercial and there was this beautiful girl running across the beach, and her family chasing her, and it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, what if, my husband doesn't love me anymore? What if I can't chase after my family or my daughters? What if I can't run again? What if I can't work again? What if tomorrow they amputate my leg? What if I die? Like, I was spiraling down into a depression and looked down at my leg thinking, am I ever going to be able to wear shorts again? What is going to happen? I've completely lost my identity. And in that moment, something that really, really helped me in that moment, and it's still something I practice every day. And I say practice because I believe that I can always improve on everything I do, is gratitude. Because in that moment I thought, wait, I can go down the road of despair and focusing on what I can't do, or I can focus on what I'm grateful for. And I just started writing everything, every nurse's name down so I wouldn't forget their name and I could thank them by name. Every single client that came to see me, every friend, flowers they brought me, food they brought me, so I could write them a thank you note. And I noticed when I started thinking about remembering the people that I wanted to write thank you notes for, how it filled me with gratitude. And gratitude is alchemy, and it really changes what you can't do into what you can do, and what you don't have into what you do have. And so that part helped me through each day in the hospital. And that was really the easy part. The hard part was when I got out of the hospital and I was diagnosed with a nerve disease called complex regional pain syndrome, which is an incurable disease. I was told, get back in my wheelchair. I would never walk again. The doctor said, you'll never work again. You're going to be permanently disabled. And I was like, that's just not the life that I think is for me. Like, nothing against wheelchairs. My brother's been in a wheelchair his whole life, but that's not what I want to do. I said, all I was focused on was I needed my clients more than they needed me. I needed a purpose. And so I worked every single day. My first goal was to working on my mindset, but also focusing on baby steps and setting small attainable goals. Cause I had this big vision of I was going to train my clients again. I was going to get back into fitness. It hadn't hit me that no, your life has changed. It really has changed. And I think we have to go through this process and we have to try. And sometimes, what I've realized is resilience doesn't mean bouncing back. And that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to get back to what I was doing, and I was trying to fix what was broken. And sometimes instead of trying to go back or fix what's broken, we need to open our mind up to, well, what lies ahead and what else is there that we could do? What else brings us joy? But first I had to get out of that hospital bed. I was in the living room. We had a hospital bed set up in the living room. And every day I would practice standing up. And it was at first only seconds at a time. And I'd have to lay back in bed and elevate my leg to let the blood flow come back down, because the arteries and veins were so damaged. The blood would get stuck at the bottom of my leg. And little by little, I would set these small attainable goals. And I remember the first time I could walk on crutches around the block to Starbucks, and I could sit there, and the reward, how rewarding that was. That was a goal. Well, actually, to be completely transparent, my first goal was to be able to walk with crutches down the hall, around the corner to the bathroom so I could use the bathroom on my own. And that was a big deal. And I share that because if I would have focused on, I want to run a marathon again, that was too big of a goal, and I'd probably still be in a hospital bed. But I think if we set these small attainable goals and we celebrate our victories along the way, then we can achieve these things. But I think the biggest lesson that I learned is I was in denial about a lot of things. I tried to hide my scars. I tried to hide the fact that I was in pain. I tried to stuff it down. I didn't want to admit that I had a nerve disease. And what I realized is when we don't allow ourselves to feel these feelings and we stuff them down, they eventually rise to the surface, and they come up in everything we do, the way we love, the way we work, the way we lead, in every single way. And instead of just kind of trying to deal with those feelings, I had to learn to heal those feelings. And that took time, and it took a while for me to accept all my scars, because I hated the way that I looked. I hated the scars. I actually went in about a year after my accident and asked the doctor, I was like, you know what, Dr. West, I appreciate all you've done to save my leg and all these surgeries, but I'm in too much pain. This leg is disgusting and ugly, and I need you to amputate it. And he did something that changed everything for me. He got my leg, he sat down in front of me and he put my leg in his lap. Like, usually they put your leg like on the table, and he put my leg in his lap and he looked at it like it was a masterpiece. And I thought, wow, like tears it still gets me emotional because it changed my life because of him accepting my leg and looking at it the way he did. I was like, wow, if he can do that, maybe I can learn to love my leg too. And he said that amputation isn't an option. He said, you've got this nerve disease, and if we amputate, it could spread. And that was when everything changed. And it was, I had to dig deep to find out who I was, because my whole identity was caught up. And this sounds so shallow, but being a dancer and in the fitness industry and fitness modeling, my identity was caught up in the way that I looked. And I had to dig in what I could provide and how much I worked. And what I had to do is go, well, who am I really? And what is my worth really? And how can I learn to love my leg and myself? And sometimes I think we need somebody to love us before we can learn to love ourselves in those situations, and believe in us before we can believe in ourselves when we're going through a challenging time. And for me, that definitely was a life changer for me. And I think that once you can accept your imperfections, accept anything that you've done in the past that you're holding on to, and you're not forgiving yourself, or you have shame, like shine a light on that shame. And when you can accept yourself and where you are on your journey, it's freedom, because it puts you in the driver's seat of your life. And then you get to make choices. You get to take action steps. You get to have the grit to move forward, and the passion and the perseverance to move forward. And then also, like, nobody can use it against you. You know, I got sober, and it took me like 5 years of healing and going to 12-step meetings, before I could talk about it on social media. It took me about 2 years before I could show the scars on my leg. It took me years, gosh, 30 something years before I could talk about the sexual abuse of my childhood when I was sexually abused. And so I always say share from a scar and not an open wound. But when you do accept who you are, and it allows you to connect with a community of people and move forward, make genuine connections. And I think that success is built on relationships. And I'm sorry, I'm just going off on a tangent here, but I'm just passionate about this.
Yeah, Amberly, it's so good, everything that you're saying. And to say, hey, my identity was caught up in basically your career, that's not shallow at all. And I meet a lot of folks where their identity is, it could be work, it could be a kid that's a football star, and it's taken away from them for whatever reason, and they just crash. And I look at personally, my identity is the value that I create in the world, and I think about cultivating value that's material. People know that, money. I mean, everybody mostly goes there, but it's not in balance because they're not cultivating emotional energy value creation or the spiritual value part of it. And so I try to do those things in balance. And, last year, nothing like what you went through, but I went down really hard with SLE, systemic lupus. And in the first 2 months, I lost over 30 pounds of muscle fast. It just wasted it away. It would take me, I always kept my sense of humor through the whole thing. I think we have to do that.
Yeah, that helps, doesn't it?
Helps a lot. but it would take me 2 hours to work up for a couple of months straight just to get out of bed in the morning. The pain was so much. My hands were so swollen. I couldn't make a fist to save myself. So here's how this helped me in making my identity, creating value in the world in those three buckets. I played guitar my whole life since I was, 5, 6 years old. In the 80s, I played over 1,000 nights on stage. Is how I made most of my money back then, singing, playing guitar. I'm doing this podcast with you right now from my home music studio. I've got 50 guitars hanging in here, and I was being told, like this may not get better, and you may never be able to play guitar again. And my first thought was, okay, well, I've got a lot of friends that are guitar players. I wonder which one they'll like that I give to them, and I can
Oh.
write, I can speak, because my purpose, my identity, if you will, is creating value in the world. And it's pushing this concept of holistic value creation of the world. So it was like there was nothing depressing about it other than, okay, I'm going to make the best of it. And I'm going to kick this thing's butt and I'm going to win when everybody else says, it could be really bad. And I'm making amazing progress. So hyperbaric oxygen, all kinds of cool things, no drugs whatsoever.
Wow.
I'm experiencing maybe 10% of the discomfort today, but long way around getting to the point. If your identity is the value you create in the world, then things happen physically and okay, well, we're going to get through that, but I can shift how I choose to create this particular value. And so
And yeah, I love that so much.
yeah, and what I love about what you've done is you've taken, here's my identity that got crushed. I'm going through this. Oh my gosh, how am I going to save my leg and get through all of it? Candidly, almost dying, probably way more than once. And now you've leveraged it into creating, because of all this, more value in the world. I'm guessing, you tell our listeners, but more value than you ever thought possible before this happened. So you converted it into what I'm kind of talking about here. And I love that.
Oh, thank you so much. And you know what? I'm so excited that you're asking this because like right before I got on with you, I have what my most favorite thing that I get to do. And honestly, like I thought, okay, well, I'm going to write a book and I wrote a book and I had so many people saying, you're crazy. Like you're the fitness girl. I didn't even own a computer. I wrote 90% of my book in a notebook and then typed it up, got a publisher and published my book. Then I started sharing stuff on social media. And so it started with a book and then I started building this community on social media, like real connections on social media. And I just got off of a call, because I started getting invited on stages and people were asking me, how are you getting on stages? How do you tell your story? How did you write your book? How did you start your podcast? So I put together a mastermind, and the call that I just got off of is with the ladies that I get to be with weekly in my mastermind, and I get to help them shine and show them the way and give them the shortcuts and then put them on stage and show them how to teach, share their message and make a positive impact and cause a positive ripple effect in the world. And so I get to, really help other people. And that is where I feel like being of service, that is where my fulfillment really is. That's what I love doing the most. And I love doing my podcast. Don't get me wrong. I love when I get to travel and go speak on stages. But my favorite part about that is when I get to be outside meeting people at the conference or signing books and I get to talk to people at the conference. And so I used to love being able to make a difference when I was training clients, and that was one-on-one, and I could see the growth and I could see it not just physically, but how it helped them mentally. That was amazing. But to be able to do it in a bigger way is like, wow, that's why I say, I'm so glad I didn't keep trying and trying to bounce back. But I thought, well, I thought to myself, what brings me joy And I think it's important for, anybody listening, if you're like, well, I don't know what my purpose is, or I don't know what to do or how to add value. Well, I would say you really do. It's something you're probably already really good at. It's maybe something that you really loved doing that sparked joy when you were a kid. That usually has something to do with what you're going to do or what you could do as an adult. And to give you an example of that, when I was a little girl, I think I was probably, I don't know, little. I was like 7, 8 years old. I organized a club with my cousins and we met out in the chicken coop, lived out in the country, out in the chicken coop. And I called us the Super Chicks, and I made t-shirts with little fuzzy decals of little chicks on it. And on the back, it said the Super Chicks. And I was like, okay, this is what we're doing. And I just loved like being the leader. And, the boys would try to pick on us. And I'd be like, this is what we're going to do. And so that led to then when I was older, the first thing I did when I moved to California, I organized a group of ladies that were age like 60 to 80 years old and taught them how to tap dance. And we would go all over the city to all the different nursing homes and they would perform a tap dance. And so I've always loved making a positive impact and adding value any way I can. And I love seeing people light up with joy. And that's what I loved doing when I was a kid, when I would stand on a table at the Dairy Queen and dance after the football game, dance to the jukebox. I didn't like because people were clapping for me. I liked that I could see it was sparking joy and they would dance too. And so now I get to dance on stage, but it's speaking at an event. And I actually once had an agent tell me, Amberly, you do not need to be dancing on stage. And I'm like, I can't help it. Like that, it just comes out. That's what happens. That's what I do. And in fact, my daughter was at a dinner. It was with a bunch of entrepreneurs and my daughter. I was glad she was there at the dinner. And this big time billionaire goes, so Ruby, is there anything that your mom does that really embarrasses you? And she goes, oh, yes, she dances all the time, everywhere we go. And I'm like, well, good. Yeah. Cause it makes me happy. I think we need to do what makes us happy.
Yeah. Well, and I think it elevates emotional energy in the room. So you're infusing that in there. And that's one of the most important categories of value creation, in my opinion. I think it's the X factor, and I think it's the scarcest commodity on the planet. Positive emotional energy supercharges everything. Like I'd rather live half as long if it was on 9 or 10 as opposed to 1 or 2. There's
I'm there with you.
such a big difference. I look at it as it's so important to keep moving physically, emotionally, and mentally, and everything that goes with that in a direction of, more value, being healthier, however you want to look at it. You were able to do that your whole life. And so I like to say, I trust the struggle, because when it's hard, that's like going to the gym for life, and you come out the other side able to, lift more weights, create more value, and do all that. But was there a point where you just locked into, I'm going to get through this and drive and keep moving and trusting the struggle to take bigger and bigger steps going forward? What was that like for you as that mindset was developing?
Well, you know what? I think that I'm actually grateful for every single struggle that I had as a kid, and that I did have to work for everything that I had. Like, we didn't have a lot of money. I mean, in fact, at Christmas, there were times when my mom was like, I'm so sorry, we're not going to have Christmas gifts this year. We just don't have the money. And then I think it was the church or maybe my uncle, I'm not sure, but would leave a box of money on our doorstep. If I wanted something as a kid, I had to work for it. So I think my first babysitting job was when I was 8 years old. By the time I was 13, I had a job. By the time I was in high school, I had 4 jobs. I mean, I was a lifeguard. I worked at the cookie jar. I was teaching dance. I was babysitting, and I would scrub toilets if I had to. Like, I just had to save up enough money because I had to buy my own car. And I got to, and I took very good care of that car. It made me appreciate it more. And I also knew that I wanted to move to California at a very young age. And I knew that I didn't have, parents that were going to be like, oh, let's fly you to California and we'll find you a cute little apartment and or get you set up in your dorm in college. I had a partial scholarship to UCLA, which I knew I wasn't going to go there. I knew I wanted to audition at the dance center. I wanted to be a professional dancer. But I was like, yeah, that's great. I got a partial scholarship. I knew that it was up to me to save up that money. Also, I knew that, I just talked to a friend about this. My oldest brother used to beat the crap out of me. And when I say beat the crap out of me, I'm not talking about pushing and shoving around. I'm talking about like fist punches in the mouth, picking me up, throwing me across the room. And I was little back then. I was so small, and I would hit the wall and slide down the wall, and I would run back at him, and he would just hold my head and laugh, and I'd be swinging at him. But also, the sexual abuse from my stepfather, when I finally got the courage up to go tell my dad what was happening, I made my dad promise. I said, Dad, please don't tell anybody. And he didn't. And it was a cry for help. And in that moment, I thought, wow, I'm not worthy enough to be protected or loved. And then I thought, well, you know what? If I'm going to be taken care of, it's up to me. Like, I'm going to have to do it. And the next time my stepdad came in my bedroom, man, I kicked him and punched him, and I fought him off. And you know what? That's the last time he ever laid a hand on me. Now, the psychological stuff still went on. And I guess I'm emotional and can cry because I can cry now, because for the longest time, for years, I didn't cry because he would say, see, I knew I could make you cry, and he would laugh at me. So my defense was I wouldn't cry. And I was like, he doesn't have me because I'm not going to cry. So I didn't cry for years. And all that abuse inspired me to get into Krav Maga, Muay Thai, kickboxing, regular boxing. I even held mitts for CHP officers, trained CHP officers for the test to be in the police force, trained male bodybuilders. So I was like, I'm never going to let anybody beat me up again. I'm going to be just as strong as these male bodybuilders. Like, I was surprisingly strong for as small as I looked. I trained with the bodybuilders. And so I think that everything that we go through, we can go, okay, what can we learn from it? What positive can we take from it? And, like that sexual abuse, I don't wish that upon anyone. But that's actually been a blessing in a way, because I can bless others, because I can help others walk without shame and hold their head high and have dignity and know that it's not their fault, that they don't have to be a victim. They can be the victor of their life. And so everything that I've gone through, it qualifies me to help someone that is struggling, that hasn't been able to get through that situation, and it took a long time to understand that. And I had stuffed down all those feelings for a long time. And when I couldn't get out of pain after the accident, that's when I started drinking, which there was a lot of shame about that, because I was like, how did I go from being in the fitness industry and so fit to now drinking every day? But being able to get sober and talk about it, it's been the biggest blessing in my life, because I've helped so many other people to get sober. and to take their life back and take their health back. And so I think that we learn grit through these challenges, and it's not something that resilience is something we need to work on and strengthen actually before we need it. And it's getting up. And you know what? Look, I don't know if you saw on my social media, but I just did an interview with Jamie Kern-Lima on my podcast. And I wasn't going to reschedule her, but I had been wrestling with my daughter, and I fell down and I did a face plant in the coffee table. I had 2 black eyes, a busted nose, and a scar, 9 stitches on my forehead. But I showed up to do this interview with Jamie Kern-Lima. And I was like, I'm going to still show up. And so I share that because it's like, grit and resilience doesn't mean that you don't mess up, that you don't fall flat on your face, that you don't feel down sometimes. It means that you just get back up, that you recognize when you feel down, and you develop the tools and the strength and the mindset and mind, body, spirit strength to get through it again and again and again.
Yeah. And, there's a lot of struggle in the world. And I think today a number of folks look at almost any struggle as unhealthy. I talked to a CEO this morning, said, I can't believe this nightmare is going on, and there's cash issues and might not be able to make payroll next week. And I said, what are you talking about? This is your healthy struggle right now, so you can learn how to make better decisions going forward. So you're not in this position. Like you'll be capable enough for that. So all struggle is not trauma for sure. There's lots of healthy struggle. We should embrace it, trust all of that. The unhealthy struggle, what I really admire is that you've leveraged it to help so many, and believe you can get through that. And when I think about physical trauma and emotional trauma, because I've heard you talk about that, I've listened to a number of your podcasts. How do you think about the difference? Because I think the emotional trauma probably can be significantly worse than just about any physical trauma. But what are your thoughts there?
I definitely think that the emotional trauma is, they're both hard, but pain is pain. I just had a conversation earlier with a client of mine who she was talking about, gosh, I was feeling so guilty, and I just feel like I beat myself up because I took a nap, and I took a longer nap, and I thought I shouldn't be doing that. My nap was too long. And I said, I just recorded a solo cast podcast about the same thing. I said, because I had an infection, a pretty severe infection recently, and still did 3 virtual presentations. And then I had one more. I was doing a live Instagram with someone to help them promote their book. And I can push through pain. I got a lot of grit, and I was having it's harder for me to give myself grace. And man, I crashed in the middle of the Instagram live, and I was like fading. I could barely think. I was like slurring my words. I was like, my body was shutting down. And I had so much shame about that. And I had to look at where that came from, why I felt the need, why I didn't just message her and say, hey, look, I just got out of urgent care and I've got this severe infection and I really need to rest. Why I had to keep pushing. And I think it comes from that emotional trauma that, gosh, you think you do all the therapy and the reading the books and self-development and all the things in your healing, but healing, I've learned, it's not linear, and there are often things that trigger you, and you can start to get back into those habits that might not be so healthy. And I had to take a good hard look at where that came from. And that was from the emotional trauma that's still so deeply, it's like it's a deep seated belief that I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy of taking care of, like, other people's needs are more important than myself. Like I'm okay. I can be beat up or but whatever, and I'm fine. Um, and that was a great, I had to go, okay, I felt, I'm going to be honest. I had a lot, I was so embarrassed that I was that way. It was a very good wake up call for me. Cause I was like, it's one thing if I do something and I'm like hurting myself a little, like I'm like, I'll get over that. Like, that's not healthy either. But I was like, I let somebody down. And I'm like, I had people messaging me going, are you okay? You did not seem like yourself. And so I immediately, my default is like, okay, what do I need to learn from this? What can I change from this? What is the gift in this? And I think if we look at the gift in it, that's how we find the joy in it. And you know what? Like I said, pain's pain. I feel like we can experience pain and joy, and it's up to us to build upon the joy. And we can do that. We have the ability to build upon the joy. Not that pain doesn't exist. We can acknowledge it, but we don't have to continue to focus on it and focus on it. We can focus on, okay, what are the lessons? What are the gifts? And what can I do next?
Yeah. It's too bad that intellectually understanding what's going on doesn't equal healing, because it would go away pretty quick, right? I mean, it just takes time. Amberly, from this discussion, we're just about out of time. What was your biggest takeaway from our discussion here today?
You know what? I think my biggest takeaway is I'm just so grateful for you and your friendship. And like I knew the first time we met, I was so grateful when you came on my podcast. And I knew, I was like, man, I really like him. But then, after we've been able to talk and connect over this time, and I realized we have so much in common, even though our stories are a little different. Like we have so much in common, like with your leg infection, and then what you recently went through with your health, and what I just recently went through with a health treatment that went wrong. I just feel like I think from everything, it is, if we admit, like if we just open up and share what's going on, and we learn to ask for help, and when we can talk about it with each other and we know that we're not alone, it just builds an even more powerful connection, a more powerful relationship. And I know you and I'll be friends for life. And so I encourage everyone listening to, like, you know what? Shine a light on your shame, do the healing, start to share with someone that you trust. And there's a saying that, when you share pain, it's divided. And when you share joy, it's multiplied.
I love that. If our listeners want to learn more about the work that you're doing, where can they go to learn about that?
Well, depending on when this airs, I'm not sure when this airs, but I'd love to meet you in person. I'm having an event and I have a few tickets left in Dallas, April 19th and 20th. And you can find out more information about that at the unstoppablesuccesssummit.com. It's an annual event that I do. And amberlylago.com is where you can find the podcast. You'll be able to hear Lee's interview there, and my book, and any upcoming events and free resources as well.
All right. Well, thank you. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you liked the episode today and got some value out of it, please share it, leave a review. And until next time, show the world your value.